Welcome everybody to Flag for Discussion, episode 4. Episode is for Monday, May 5th. My name is Farbod Markazi, here today, as always, with Jace Hatfield. We got a jam-packed show today. I'm just excited that we made it to May. Happy Cinco de Drinko. But before we get into anything, let's plug our socials because we really need to be doing that more. TikTok, I think it might become a running joke, but we are actually planning on posting TikToks in the very near future. Follow us there, flagged for discussion. Maybe you'll be able to catch our first ever TikTok at some point in the near future. YouTube, if you're watching this right now on YouTube, there you go. Flagged for discussion, XF for discussion. So, with all that said, I'm like I said, I'm very excited to be here. On May 5th, being able to say we're recording another podcast, but I have a warning for the viewers and listeners, warning for Jace. I've effectively been awake since 2:45 a.m. So if I ever go off the rails, either embrace it, I guess, or just correct me.
I hope it happens. I kind of want to see where we go.
I'm honestly curious. I've had the schedule before where with my day job that it affects some things, but I don't know if I'm going to be off the rails idea wise, louder, quieter, who knows. Jace, congrats on your sister for graduating.
Thank you. She will appreciate that. Hopefully she listens and she can hear that hear
Hey,
that live.
if you're Jace's sister and you heard that, hey, comment something nice. With that being said, let's get into this episode. We have a name that I never personally expected, I don't know if you did, to bring up in this podcast throughout the entirety of this
didn't
podcast.
see this one coming.
But President Trump and Nick Saban met last week after Trump gave the commencement address at the University of Alabama. And basically, as the quote goes, Trump and Saban, per the Wall Street Journal, Trump and Saban, Alabama's former football coach, met Thursday night after the president gave the commencement address to the university. Saban told Trump the professionalization of big-time college sports, with some athletes now being paid hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars, has hurt the enterprise and created an uneven playing field. Wall Street Journal continued saying, anonymous White House officials told the WSJ that the president instructed aides to begin studying what could be in a potential executive order to help alleviate this system, maybe put up some guardrails. Now, you and I both believe that federal intervention belongs in this because at some level, I personally believe that, and I'm not unique in this, you're not unique in this, a lot of talking heads out there, way bigger than us, have said it, that this situation, for better or for worse, has gone past the level where you can avoid federal intervention. Now you almost do. Obviously, there's the House settlement that's supposedly coming. We're still waiting on that. But let's talk about this. Talk about what President Trump could maybe do. Do you think it's a bunch of baloney? How could it help? I just want your reaction in general.
Initial reaction was kind of excited to hear this. As you mentioned, we were both kind of on the same page of something needed to step in. I know like there's going to be. I don't have a law degree or anything. I know there's going to be interventions with Title IX, antitrust law, and once you start getting into stuff, labor laws, employment laws, settlements for past college football players that would be considered employees. So, when you get convoluted, all that, I don't think the NCAA was going to be able to do what it needed to do in order to get NIL back on track. So I think that's kind of where the federal government needed to step in and probably help them out and or just make their own decision. Whether it'll actually get done or not, that's maybe a more of a political discussion that we'll leave out of the show. But I mean I think we both hope that it does. If we're gonna do something about it, this would be I think a step in the right direction. And I trust Nick Saban if we're talking like college football head who thinks they have a direction of where I almost said the league, where college football, the sport could go. I think Nick Saban would be a trusted person that at least he's been around for what 40, 50 years in the college football space. So I trust his opinion. If he's the advisor with these aides, that would be I think that'd be a win for the college football as a sport.
Yeah, I think in general, this is when I first read it or saw the tweet, I thought it was, as I wrote in our rundown, kind of a dog and pony show. I was a little fearful because I don't want the sport that I love, the sport that we're talking about right now, to not become politicized. That's the wrong word, but to become a line item on a no matter what Democrat,
Yep.
Republican, on a president's accomplishments as they want to put out over their first 100 days, over their first year. I want it to be fixed and fixed right. And the problem
Hmm.
with college football in general right now, and there's a lot, but the NIL, you and I have always agreed, is it's a good thing. When we were at school and we were working with the football programs, there were definitely higher ups that were had a little trepidation for it, but we basically thought this is such a massive business. If let me give you an example. I know Caitlin Clark in Iowa, or pre the I would argue the Caitlin Clark before her, Sabrina Ionescu at the University of Oregon. She predated NIL, but I think you and I would agree she was the reason the Team USA, the women's team, came to Oregon and played
Yeah,
them.
100%.
She was the reason a bunch of people started buying the number 20 Sabrina Ionescu Oregon Ducks jerseys, and she didn't make a dime off that. So you and I both
Hmm.
agreed that NIL in general was important. Where I like struggled in this, and I'll repeat myself, is I didn't want this to become a thing that minor things are done to it and it just becomes a roadblock to actually finding the solution. The problem right now in general is there's networks, there's a lot of big money in college football that have led to certain decisions being made, and then the NCAA not being able to fight back, and they're in their own legal battles right now. That it's really hurt the protection of these student athletes and the programs themselves. Where in general, I hope something good comes about it. It's just I'm very skeptical.
Yeah, and I think too, a lot of people think this is just geared towards fair play, and that's definitely a big part of it. But a lot of people don't realize that even in the NIL era, athletes don't always win in the sense that there's a lot of athletes that get promised a big paycheck, and season comes around, and then they're like, "Hey, where's that $1 million you promised me?" And it turns out they had 10,000 to give. So there's not really anything holding schools and NIL collectives accountable for the money that they're offering kids. It's been fishy on what's guaranteed and what's not. What these kids are, if the money's being offered to them is even existent or not. That's been an issue student athletes have had. So I do think this is also protecting the student athletes. I think this would be protecting schools. Obviously, it completely depends on how this is written and how it comes down. That hasn't even begun to be discussed yet. So jury would still be out on like if we're going the right direction. But I do think there's a world where we can make this work better for student athletes, better for the programs, better for fans. So I do hope we
Now,
see,
I do
as
think
this goes on, we see.
yeah, exactly. I do think we need to bring up this wasn't our A block because it included President Trump in it or ex senator or whatever. It was our A block because this has been the argument for months now. Federal intervention is needed,
Hmm.
and we do need to bring up the fact that, well, there's a House settlement that would essentially introduce a college football cap. Does a lot more things, but in general, there's a certain amount of money every university is allowed to quote unquote pay their student athletes. Football programs at major schools will probably get a good chunk of that compared to their basketball programs, but every university is up to gets to decide what they want from there. The question at that point and the benefit of that at that point, and for our viewers and listeners out there, the reason everyone wants some sort of federal intervention is, like I said, we're a little past the point of no return, and we can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. But the where was I going with this? But the reason everyone wants it is because NIL has become pay for play. It's not NIL is what it was intended to be, where a student like Sabrina Ionescu or take Johnny Manziel at A&M or whatever, where these kids come into school, get to have a traditional recruitment. They choose the coach and the program that suits them best football wise, where they feel they'll be happiest, and then they go work hard, make a name for themselves, and then because of that, here's a dealership that wants a sponsorship. Here's a coffee shop that wants to talk to you. That's how NIL was envisioned when you and I were talking about this. And that's what the House settlement could bring. And then, so you could bring back almost a sense of traditional recruitment with NIL on top of that. So a kid in currently a 4-star wide receiver would be able to be quote unquote traditionally recruited, but with the promise or being able to tell the kid, hey, we have these opportunities available for you once you get here. Not we're going to pay you $200,000 to come here and then you get to make more money on top. There's barriers and guidelines to that. I don't want to keep rambling. There's also, I've heard talking heads talk about if this House settlement comes through, if there is a college football quote unquote cap, you'll be able to escalate the payments to players year by year to kind of encourage them to stay where they are. So if a kid can make $100,000 year one, if you stay, you can make $150,000, $200,000 year two. But if you transfer or leave, you'll stick at the $100,000, whatever that money ends up being. I'm just throwing stuff out there. But yeah, this is just a really important conversation. I ramble a lot. I would love to get your takes.
No, I love that. And kind of what you said about contract, it's like the bird rights in the NBA. You know, how if a player stays X amount of years, I think it's if you're signing their second contract, you know, they can go they get a super max and you get eligible for those kind of things. So I like the idea of incentivizing these kids to stay, also to be recruited traditionally. I think NIL has to the detriment of kids at the moment. You know, these are 17, 16-year-old kids you're recruiting. Money talks to 16, 17-year-old, especially kids who need money and their families might be in a financial situation where money now is important. You might get a kid to make a bad life decision because you waved a check in his face. And we want to protect student athletes from those scenarios as well. And I think that part of the reason why we see the transfer portal blowing up as much as it has is these kids are being put into a spot where they have to make a decision that might not be the best decision long term for them, but right now is the best decision. They realize a year or two down the road, you know, this is not what's best for me long term. They kind of come around to it, and now they have to jump in the portal. So I think this also, like, a benefit of this would be you'd see the transfer portal be used a little bit more in the way that it was intended as well, which was for kids to find better situations for themselves. I think you would see the number of entrants probably decrease, and the people that are entering it maybe would become a little bit more like, I actually need this right now, not, oh, I'm going to see if I can just go make a little bit more money out here.
So we have covered what is good about NIL federal intervention. I'm not smart enough to be able to talk on this podcast or even privately to you of what an executive order could hold.
Same.
I am. That's not my line of thinking. That's not where I am. With that said, like you said earlier, with Nick Saban, there's probably no better ambassador for the sport. And I know a lot of fans out there who lost to Nick Saban a bunch. They don't want to see
All
him
of us.
there. Oh yeah, we all did. But they don't want to see him as the face of college football. But if there's someone whose microphone still carries that boom, it's Nick Saban. And I think that's where the vacuum was left when he retired. There were so many people out there talking about, well, who's going to be the best coach? Who's the top coach now in the country? Who's going to win the national? Who's going to be the recruiting class? Blah, blah, blah. Now that he retired. But very few people were talking about when Nick Saban said something during his tenure, especially after he got even more established at Alabama. Things happened, and he was the voice of college football while he was the coach at Alabama. It wasn't. it wasn't him complaining all the time, but there's a reason a lot of rules in the SEC right now, or a lot of rules in the NCAA implemented in general, we're almost trying to beat down the success of Nick Saban, and then through that, the voice just got bigger and bigger and bigger. So there was a vacuum left when he retired. There was, all right, is Kirby Smart going to take that role, or is he even interested in it? Does someone get to choose if they want that role, or do they earn their way? Does it naturally happen? Dan Lanning's made some comments in the recent weeks about what he wants to see about college football. Lane Kiffin has his takes. There's a lot of people out there a lot of coaches out there who obviously they talk behind closed doors about what they want to see. Nick Saban, because he's affiliated only with ESPN and with the University of Alabama, but he's not getting paid to win and give football games for them anymore. He's almost a perfect ambassador for the sport, in my opinion.
I agree. And I think all of us kind of wear the tinfoil hats for our own teams. And so we're all going to want to see our coaches or our former coaches, and we're not going to want to see coaches that we weren't our fans of. But I think if you try and take a step back and think about objectively about the sport, nobody would know the direction of a sport and where a sport was and has been and is going than a guy who dominated it for 40 years. I think like also Nick Saban, a lot of people have speculations of recruiting violations, that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, very clean slate. He's never been like nothing's ever come out about him that's been legit or real or been proven real. He was kind of always a highly respected guy in the industry. I mean, coaches all over the country have always had immense respect for him. Even like I don't want to say random coaches, but he's one of those guys that has an immense coaching tree, and every single guy from that tree speaks so highly of Nick Saban. And you don't always see that with a lot of coaches. I don't want to throw coaches under the bus, but like I'll say like an Urban Meyer, yes, he's dominated the sport and he knows it well, but he's also been in the news in a lot of negative lights. And you look at a lot of coaches that have come from his coaching tree have been put in negative lights and might not have been as praiseful of him as guys like Kirby Smart and Dan Lanning and Steve Sarkisian are about a Nick Saban. So I feel like Nick Saban's kind of like that trusted grandpa of college football right now. And I think he's someone that I really would like to see his hands in on this because, like you alluded to, we don't really know much about executive orders and law and all that kind of stuff. But I would get a little nervous if we just like let the government make this executive order without much intervention from a Nick Saban or from some sort of college football talking heads. That's where like my fear, if we talk about the bad side of this, my fear would be, do we just let it go too crazy and we let people who shouldn't be making these decisions make this decision, and we don't factor in the people who know what they're talking about? That would be my fear with doing this.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel, and that's a really good place to kind of put a bow on this topic. Is we all know that there should be change, and we all think that federal intervention is probably required. With that said, I don't care who you follow, what ideology you have, or what side of the political aisle you are on. Anyone can relate to this in the fact that it's scary when you try to put things in the hands of our government. And
Yeah.
I just don't want this sport that has already, I wouldn't say it's going down. The ratings are up, everything's great about it. It's still a lot of fun, and there's still vitriol between fan bases. There's still a lot of excitement, and we both hold a lot of love for our schools as well. With that said, at one point in time, WWE used to be bigger. Boxing used to, like the sports that everyone said were immune to their own, like their success, or immune to failure. They fell. Baseball fell.
NBA is falling
Yeah.
drastically right now.
The
And honestly, the NBA is one of our best. Like, if you want to make like an allegory here, the NBA is one of the best references for college football right now in terms of, hey, what happens when we lose control over money and teams' ability to pay players and teams' inabilities to afford players, and kind of seeing where that's gone. I think that's almost your best parallel of a league. And I mean, the NBA, they've been talking about, losing 20+% in their ratings the last couple of years, especially this year. If college football needs to be careful, it can happen.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I lie on this in general. It's let's be careful. Let's not. Hopefully, if you're going to make changes, you got smart people in the room, and Nick Saban should be in there, at least giving his experience. And he doesn't need to know the legalities of everything. But like you said, he's a guy who coached for decades. Everyone says fairly positive things about him, and the biggest major scandal on his hands. It's not a scandal. He owns a lot of Mercedes dealerships. The I just hope to put a bow on this once again. If this does happen, if there is an executive order or the House settlement does come through, it's because the right people were in the room to make that decision, to lead to that decision. And it's not because it's just another success by the president that they can take credit of and make it a political thing. That's just how I feel about it. Let's move from a president to a potential Secret Service agent, Mario Cristobal. For those that don't know the story, Mario, before he started his coaching career, he had an offer to join the academy. I don't know how that program works, to become a federal Secret Service agent. That guy's sharp.
If you've ever seen Mario Cristobal, terrifying physical human. He looks like he could throw me like a football 100 yards, and I'm not even a small person. He is a specimen, and he's very stoic.
Yeah, exactly. I
Together.
I don't know how you felt about my transition from president to Secret Service agent. It just came in my head.
I love that. The
Yeah.
other one I was thinking was I started listing Nick Saban coaching tree, and I was like, I didn't even mention the one we're going to talk about here in a minute.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so there you go. From Nick Saban to one of his disciples. Let's talk about Mario Cristobal's Miami Hurricanes. Mario Cristobal left Oregon for his alma mater, his home, in 3 years ago. In the 3 years since, he's gone 5-7 year one, 7-6 year two, 10-3 last year with Cam Ward. Just a phenomenal season last year. There's a lot of detractors, but if you just look at the fact, I hate the people who used to always say Texas is back or Miami's back. Miami is at least a serious program now. They brought in Carson Beck to fill in the shoes of Cam Ward. He has a UCL injury, which for non-baseball fans likely required Tommy John surgery, which is not an ideal thing to come back from. Football players, Brock Purdy had it a couple years back in the NFL. Football players don't require the same throwing motion, same everything that baseball pitchers do, so it's a bit of a quicker recovery from my just viewership experience, I think. But like I said, 5-7, 7-6 to 10-3, great year, right? What does success look like for Cristobal in year 4?
Yeah, I think double digit wins. I think we can get in the schedule here in a minute too. Mario Cristobal can recruit. We know that, and I think he's recruiting at a level that would be considered successful. They have the number
Sorry, I jumped the
3
gun.
transfer portal class. No, I like it. They have the number 3 transfer portal class, so I would consider that part successful as well. Obviously the output on the field is going to be the big step for Mario. And when he was at Oregon, he recruited really well. Also took them from one of their lowest points in the last 20, 30 years and brought them right back to relevancy within, two seasons there. And he's doing the same thing at Miami. The one thing he couldn't do at Oregon, but he left maybe a little too soon to find out, was get over that hump of winning the big games, winning a conference championship, winning playoff games. I think this is the year, if you're Miami, you want to see an ACC championship game appearance. Clemson's going to be really good. I don't know. You can lose that game to Clemson and still have a successful season, but I do think you need to appear in it. They're the second favorites in betting odds, with a decent jump over Louisville, SMU, and Georgia Tech. All three of those teams, I think, are going to be very beatable if you're Miami. It should be beatable if you're Miami, especially with a lot of their portal additions. They revamped their entire defensive back room. They got Charles Brantley out of Michigan State. That was a big addition for them. They got Ethan O'Connor out of Wazoo, also a big addition for them. Trying to think, Carson Beck, you mentioned that with Georgia. So they brought in pieces that that were going to be weaknesses this year. A lot of people were nervous about their DB room. A lot of people were nervous about what are they going to do post Cam Ward. They've made efforts to fill those gaps, and I think if you're a Miami fan, it's go time. It's all right, Mario. Prove to me. I know you can recruit. I know you can get guys in the portal. You can win 10 games. You can beat teams that are lesser than us. Can we avoid the random one-off losses that are just mind-boggling? And then can we take that jump into making an ACC championship game and becoming a real true contender?
I think,
Especially, I think losing that Iowa State game last
yeah.
year, the Pop Tart Bowl, probably left a bad taste in a Miami's fan mouth.
So let's look at last year. Last year, offense was prolific, and for anyone
Hmm.
who's followed Mario Cristobal for as long as Jason and I have, it was nothing like his offense. Shane Dawson, their offensive coordinator, that's his name, I believe.
Yes.
But Shane Dawson brought a essential, not an air raid system, but close to, with Cam Ward, and they really popped. Cam Ward was awesome, number one overall pick in the NFL draft. Everything was great about the offense. I Xavier Restrepo was
Restrepo was
awesome.
great.
Yeah, the Damian Martinez was great. They had they have a bunch of dudes on the offense, and I would also argue if you have followed Mario Cristobal this long, his recruiting pitch has always been, "I'm going to go get the best talent, and then on the offensive line, I'm going to go get the big boys." And he knows how to coach them up. We talked about it last podcast. If you want to see a funny sight, but a great, wonderful offensive line coach, look up Miami's offensive line coach, Alex Mirabal. You just can't, when you see him in person, you can't imagine he's an offensive line coach. With that said, Mario's whole game plan is we're going to be bigger, tougher, stronger, and more physical than the other team. And it might be a little rocky at first, but through 4 quarters, we're going to wear you down and we're going to beat your ass.
Hmm.
So last year, the problem with that, the defense was just non-existent, and it wasn't because of personnel. I don't think it was. They probably did need to upgrade some personnel, like you said. They brought in the defensive back from Michigan State. They brought in a good amount of transfer talent to try to fill those
Hmm.
gaps, but they needed at least a new voice in the room defensively. They brought in the Minnesota defensive coordinator who had a great year defensively last year.
Hmm.
And that is where my biggest interest lies for Miami. If Miami is to take, quote unquote, the next step, Mario Cristobal has shown that he can build a winning team. He can build a perennial 9 to 12 win team. He can put talent on the field. Like you said, he needs to figure out how to get over that hump. And looking at this year's current team, they certainly have the potential to do so. Like you said, number 2 odds per FanDuel to win the ACC. I'm not going to give you my pick right now, but everyone basically expects if Carson Beck's healthy, they should win the ACC. Let's get into their schedule real quick. They start out with kind of a banger.
Yeah, this is a fun schedule.
Yeah. So August 31st, let me take it full. They'll take on Notre Dame at home, and then they got, I would say, a couple winnable games. A really, really intriguing game against Florida. 2 coaches whose fan bases both hate the other one, want them to not be fired though because they think they can eventually beat them, or Miami's case last year, beat them last year. I wish I got the over under for their season this year. But what do you think? What do you make of the schedule?
Yeah, I'm gonna skip those first 5 games. I think Louisville down. You got to win those games. I think all 7 of those have to be wins. At SMU will be tough. SMU was a great team last year. They did lose a lot of talent, but I think those 7 games, if you're Mario Cristobal, like that at SMU game or that like at Virginia Tech game would be a pretty classic Mario. Think of that Georgia Tech game a couple years ago, kind of lost, where it's like we're the better team. We were better for 59 minutes, and we made a bonehead decision late in the game that cost us to win. If you're Miami and you want to take that next step in playing in an ACC championship game, you have to beat the teams that you should beat. I think all 7 of those. So let's go back to that top 5. Notre Dame, we'll come back to them. Bethune Cookman, obviously, I'm going to give that one a win. South Florida, I'm going to give that one a win. Florida and Florida State, they won at the Swamp last year, and that was, I believe, week 1 or week 2. It was early in the year. It was like during the recruiting trips,
It was the
and
first game of the
Miami
year.
players were recruiting the
The Florida fans.
Florida recruits.
Yeah.
That's a big game. We'll talk about it at a later point, but Billy Napier on a hot seat. You have a chance to put a coach in your same state who's on a hot seat, both actually Billy Napier and Mike Norvell. You have a chance to put him 6 feet under here if you're Mario Cristobal. And if you want to prove to all of those big time Florida recruits, like Miami's the place to be. We're the school in Florida. Those are the games you have to win, especially Florida at home. And then especially with all the momentum they've gotten over the last couple of years with DJ Lagway and kind of bigger recruits now. Florida State, this is not a good life lesson, but a good football lesson. Kick someone while they're down in football. Don't do that in life, but do it in football. After you're an in-state rival that had one of the worst seasons they've had in their history, you've got to finish them off here, especially on the road. And then that Notre Dame game, that I'm going to put that one as a loss, just because I think, not to be too game analytical already, there's a lot to be determined. Based on Miami's mock-up, I think their biggest weakness on offense is going to be their ability to throw the ball and catch up if they're behind. On the flip side, I think defensively, you run a 4-2-5 and you've kind of brought in a bunch of smaller backs to play the pass. Teams that can manhandle your defensive front you're going to have to rely on your 5'11", 160-pound Charles Brantley to make a one-on-one tackle against a Jeremiah Love. That's not happening. I love Charles Brantley. I think he's a stud player. He's not making that tackle. So I'm afraid of that Notre Dame game for him. But you have a very winnable schedule here on out. I would bet that they're favorites for every game the rest of the season, barring anything crazy happening. 10-win season, successful, especially if that means you lose Notre Dame, because that means 1 conference loss if you have one in there. But, I mean, even then, you avoid Clemson. I think you got to take advantage of a Clemson-less season. I'm rambling here, but I'm excited. This is a really fun schedule.
You're absolutely right. And I'm not sure if everyone understands how important what you just said is. They should be favorites in every game other than Notre Dame, meaning they should win. Not that every favorite wins. That's why betting exists. There's upsets every game.
Grab
There's
the
upsets
odds
every
here.
Saturday. But with that said, Notre Dame's also looking for a quarterback. I would argue Notre Dame does what Mario Cristobal wants to do better. Like the way they run their offense, the way they do their defense. Marcus Freeman does an excellent job. Chalk that up as a win, or as you said, you can chalk it up as a loss. Sure, Bethune-Cookman, you got to win. I want to highlight a couple. They've got some tricky games the first 5 weeks. So South Florida, Alex Golish, everyone expects to become a head coach in the Power 4 in the next 2 to 3 years, if not this upcoming year. He's just an excellent coach. Miami can't sleepwalk into that. Florida, DJ Lagway is awesome. And if they take the next step as a program, you'd have to imagine you can't sleepwalk that. And it's going to be a very emotional game at home. You destroyed Florida last year. Tried to recruit their recruits. So it was kind of an emotional game. Now, normally you would think, all right, emotional game, the next game is like a layoff. And that's where I think we saw in 2021 when Oregon beat Ohio State under Mario Cristobal and then lost to Stanford the following week. Everyone expected, Oregon's going to take off like a rocket ship. Nope, they lost, and they lost the game they weren't supposed to, partially because of the emotional layoff of that. But
the one caveat, look at that bye week. There's a bye week between
huge.
those 2 Florida games, which is massive for the exact reason you just said.
That is huge. I didn't even notice that. But so I would chalk Florida up as a win. It's like, let's get to the bye week. Let's stay healthy. Let's regroup and play Florida State. Florida State, I don't know if you're expecting greatness from them, or I'm not expecting they're going to be as terrible as they were last year. And they're going to be on the road against them. Mike Norvell is a good coach. it could be a tough outing if they're not ready. Like in Louisville, Jeff Brom's a damn good coach.
Yep.
So like their first 6 games, where a lot of people like to think your first couple games you might be warming up if you don't have a big out of conference game. They realistically, if I told you they're 3-3, I'd be shocked. But if I told you they're 4-2, I'd be like, their ideal goal, I think, should be come out of that first 6 game 5-1, and
Yep.
then, like you
I
said,
would agree.
beat the Stanford, SMU, Syracuse, NC State, Virginia Tech, and Pitt, like you alluded to. I do want to talk
So,
about. Go ahead.
I have one question for you on the schedule here. I'm looking at it right now. Miami over under regular season wins is 9.5. Plus 135 on that. Do you have a take currently? It can be changed for the future. Do you have an opinion on that either way? Do you feel good about either way, or is that a perfect line for you?
So this is where we'll actually answer our question. What does success look like?
That's
The odds
great call.
makers will tell you success looks like what, 9.5. You can't win half games, obviously, but it's probably a 10-win season. You don't want to go
Hmm.
back if you're trying to develop momentum for your program year over year. I would, until I know Carson Beck's status more clearly, until I know he's played in 7-on-7s with a team. I'm sorry, I got to take the under. And that's no scoff at Miami. I think, oh, actually, until I know the defense is at least organized. The You and I both, I think, completely agree that last year if Cam Ward wasn't ridiculous, they would have lost a lot more games. And we
Yes.
could be talking about as Mario on the hot seat right now. They could have been 7-5. And just thinking about what the Virginia Tech game, the Cal game,
Yeah.
can't like yeah, they made mistakes that threw them into deficits, but they should have theoretically lost those 2 games. And there were even more there. So until the defense, I see the defense lined up and they look at least a little more organized. I'm not asking for the 85 Bears. I'm asking for competence. You have that. I think Shane Dawson's a great OC. I think Mario Cristobal, despite his warts, is a great leader of men. And
Hmm.
yeah, we talked about it. Mario's a great program builder. Can he build?
Hmm.
But we haven't seen him to this point take the team to the next step. So I would have to, if the over under is at 9.5, I would have to take the under.
Yeah. That's a really good line. And I hate that they made the under like the minus 160, or I'm not looking at anymore, whatever the juice was on that. Because as a bettor, it's not always fun to take the, unfun pick. They perfected that line to me. They could not have gotten that any more annoyingly perfect. And you're almost going to know it by that bye week. If you bet the over and they lose Florida and Notre Dame, you're probably hitting the panic button on it. They have to go perfect there on out, and they wouldn't have proven to you that they're an elite team. But on the flip side, if they come out and beat Notre Dame and beat Florida and go into that bye 4-0, they would be a top 10 team in the country at that point. And you'd feel really good about the schedule there on out. Those first 4 weeks are going to be a lot of fun. First 5 weeks are going to be a lot of fun for us, not Miami fans. Miami fans, it's going to be probably pretty stressful for you. But
I
I look forward to those. And that August 31st game is going to be a riot.
Exactly. I think a lot of people, and we kind of talked about it already, but I'm just looking at the last 6 games. Stanford, you can say, yeah, you can chalk that up as a win. The program's not where they're supposed to be. They just fired their head coach. Frank Reich's taking over for a year while Andrew Luck's trying to revive that program. SMU's no slouch. They were in the playoff last year.
Yeah.
Syracuse, Fran Brown. I know they're looking for a quarterback. I kind of want to just believe in Fran Brown. They're no slouch. NC State, definitely no slouch. Virginia Tech, they're on the rise. Pittsburgh, depends on what week you get them. But they can beat you. So
Yeah, Narduzzi can play defense. You never
yeah.
know.
So my argument is like, could you see them going 11-1? Sure. They're missing Clemson. That's huge. Best case scenario,
Hmm.
probably 11-1, 10-2.
I would
You could
agree.
also see him going 8-4, and that's why I'll have to take the under on 9.5.
Also, those back to back, those three straight Florida games, like in-state Florida games, huge for. one of, if not definitely a top two, like recruiting high school football state, them in Texas. That's going to dictate a lot of dominoes in the recruiting trail for all three of those teams, especially if you're Miami and you have the upper hand on Florida and South Florida and Florida State to start the year. You can't, that's brutal momentum to lose, especially to your 6-6 Gators, your 1-11 Florida State Seminoles. You don't want to see those teams get back on track. And you have a chance to put matters in your own hands. That's as good of a scenario as you can ask for, especially getting two of those at home if you're Miami. You have a chance to put the nail in the coffin on at least the next year or two of recruiting. You got to capitalize on that.
So, to answer the question that we asked, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes ago, success
What
for
does
me,
success look like?
success for me is anything other than a single digit win season. And I know Miami
Hmm.
fans are going to want us to say we want we want a playoff appearance and we want to win the ACC. That's all on the board. There's just a lot of question marks I have with the program heading into this season. I think when you look at the ACC, if Florida State's still down, Clemson's realistically the biggest hurdle you have to jump, and they're a great team this coming year. That's why
Hmm.
Clemson's first on the odds to win the ACC list right now. But that'd be my answer. I think win less than 10 games. Winning in college football is not linear. You're not going to go like they have every year, 5-7 to improving to 7-5 to improving to 10-3. They're not going to go 11-1 or 12-0. That'd be too linear. That'd be too perfect. It's not a perfect world. But I also think Miami fans are going to be like, if they go 9-4, 8-5, they're going to start complaining, and that's where
Yeah.
success isn't there. So I don't know, what does success look like for you?
My best attempt at like a neutral party take, as if you were not a Miami fan, would be similar. I think 10 plus wins and or an ACC championship game appearance would for sure constitute success for them. My one, if I was a Miami fan and I'm really looking forward to the season, I would say has to be 10 wins or more, has to be an ACC championship game appearance. I think both those things have to happen if you're a Miami fan. You don't have to win that ACC championship game, but as an outsider, I think 10 plus wins would be a phenomenal season. Or even if you go 9-3 and your two losses were Florida, Notre Dame, and then you lose like a SMU, but you still make the ACC championship game, I would still constitute that as successful. From like a someone who doesn't have any skin in the game with Miami football, other than just I like the sport.
Exactly. All right. Moving forward, we want to introduce some fun games every week. Like I
Mhm.
said, every podcast so far. If you have any ideas for us, we would love to throw them into the pod. We would love to experiment, just have fun. We're talking college football. It's the fun part. So today we're gonna debut one. Jace, I don't know if you're ready. We don't have sound effects for this yet, but we got Snap Judgment on the show today. So what Snap Judgment is, we're going to talk about 4 topics. I'm going to ask Jace 2 questions. He's going to ask me 2 questions. They might not be the biggest topics of the week, so they're not 20, 25-minute long segments, but we're going to get through them. We're going to try to come up with a consensus or disagree or agree, whatever it is. Jace, I'm going to hand it over to you for the first question.
All right, this is a fun one. I was excited to talk about this. For the recruiting of 2026, USC has been hot. This is one of the hottest recruiting starts I've ever seen in my lifetime following college football. They have 27 commits. They're the number one team in the country by a long shot of the 2026 recruiting rankings. Are they the real deal? Are they back? Is it here to stay?
I Everyone said, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, we hate the USC's back argument, and I'm going to stick to that. I'm never going to say you're back, but we can also talk about the reality that USC has been down. And it's not just been because they can't fill the stadium as easily, or it's not been because they haven't won a lot of games from Sark to Clay Helton to Lane Kiffin in the old days to now Lincoln. For me, I think it's a wait and see approach. I think as every recruit that commitments that's come in, it's gotten me a little more excited about what USC could be, and a little more nervous as a potential rival of USC, that could mean for my program. In general, it's not that they're back; it's a wait and see because they have 27 commits as of this recording, and I don't think they're going to experience a lot of decommitments. I think every fan under the Twitter posts that say, "Oh, he'll be a dog by May," or he'll be committed to Alabama by September. No, most of these kids committed there for a reason, and whether you like to say USC's starting to drop bags, whatever, they still commit to Lincoln Riley. They commit to play in Southern California. And we've talked about for years how much of a sleeping giant they are. And you and I talked about this last night. It's crazy to see how much incompetence there must have been in running that program. Not this isn't singling out Lincoln Riley, but the fact that they just hired Notre Dame's GM, Chad Bowden, and I don't think it's all him because there's a whole organization there, but they are suddenly organized. They're galvanizing their donor base. Their fans are all over socials. I'm sure they're gonna show up in the fall. Where my trepidation for USC comes is, let's say all these guys are under NIL deals, and I'm not hating. Every Oregon commit is an NIL deal. Every Georgia commit is an NIL deal. Every Alabama commit is an NIL deal. Let's see, all these guys committed on a promise for an NIL deal. Where I would be a little scared if I was a USC fan is, let's say we go 7-6, because this team, I think, is going to be better than last year. I think the defense definitely came a long way. The offense was a little hit and miss. But if they go 7-6, none of those NIL deals are signed until signing day.
Mhm.
You're telling me Ohio State's not going to be like, hey, wide receiver, I know you love SC, I know you love Southern California. We have a comparable offer, but you can come join a 12-2 team, or you can get a 12-0 team. You can come here and join a national powerhouse. So, long story short, I'm rambling. I will never say they're back, but it's just the confirmation that they were a sleeping giant, that they were managed poorly, and then confirmation of what good management and good organization can do for you. I will just take a wait and see approach because I want to see how this season goes and how it would affect the recruitment. With that said, if these guys stick, man, the country should be watching out a little bit.
I would agree with that last part.
It in general, and I don't know if you wanted to say anything on that but that's my take. Number 2, second question of snap judgment. Right before we started recording this, literally right before this, Jared Curtis, the number 13 overall player in the country, the number 4 overall quarterback, according to 24/7, chose the Georgia Bulldogs as his next home over the Oregon Ducks. For those who haven't been following this recruitment, I don't know how, but if you haven't been following this recruitment, this kid was committed to Georgia up until the fall of last year. He decommitted just saying, I want to go see what my options are. I love Georgia. I want to see what my options are. He's from Nashville. It's been reported that neither Oregon nor Georgia had the highest NIL offer for him. So if he just was looking for the bag, he would have gone somewhere else other than these two. But he commits to Georgia now. Jace, is this a bigger gain for the Bulldogs or a bigger loss for the Oregon Ducks?
I'm going to answer that with bigger win for the Bulldogs. I also think this probably means they get Jackson Cantwell, which is the number 1 offensive tackle in the country by, I think that's probably consensus. Number 1 on most of those sites as well. I think that probably means you get both. So that's obviously a massive win.
Wouldn't that be a bigger
Combined with that,
loss for the Ducks too? Because Jackson
it
Cantwell
would.
is also number top two or Oregon as well as on Curtis.
It would, and that's a good segue here. I think the main reason why it's pretty safe to say that I think the Ducks are still going to figure it out. I know a lot of Oregon fans have kind of hit the panic alarm. The Ducks have fallen into the 20s for 2026 class. But a world where Dan Lanning exists and Will Stein exists, and a video came out last week of Sean McVay talking about how he actually steals plays and sets from Oregon. They're going to be fine. They'll figure it out. They've got NIL money. They will be all right. It's a big loss. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say, oh, they didn't need him. They needed him. They wanted him. It's a big loss, but they have a lot of stud quarterbacks. We saw in the spring game, they have four quarterbacks who look like they could start for a Power Four winning team tonight. Um, I think they'll be okay. It hurts for sure, especially as a fan. I'm trying hard to like not think about it as a fan because inside I'm obviously like, oh, but it hurts. But I think they're going to be all right. Like if you can't hit the panic alarm. It's May. I mean, last year we saw how many decommitments and recommitments throughout the season. We still have to play football games, and I think when those football games get played, people are going to see the Ducks, and things will turn out for them. Okay, Georgia, they haven't had a big name recruit quarterback in quite some time. I think Jake Fromm was the last really high rated quarterback that they got. This is big for Kirby Smart. I also think not that Georgia's like losing momentum on the grand scheme of things, but they've been the playing field around them has kind of been evening out from that like reign of absolute tear that they put on the league for 2 years. I think this is big for Georgia. I think this kind of reaffirms to Bulldog fans, Bulldog recruits, and players like, hey, we're still not, no pun intended, we're still the big dogs. Like we're still Georgia. We still get number one players in the country. We still get the big quarterback. I think this probably means they get Jackson Cantwell. They get the big tackles. I think this kind of reinforced that mentality. Like, hey, like the SEC still runs through Georgia, Texas. I know you're hyped about Arch Manning. I know you have a lot of hopes and aspirations, but remember who won the SEC last year, and now look at who's hot on the recruiting trail. And oftentimes, too, one big commitment can be that domino that kind of like
Especially
builds
the
your
quarterback.
momentum for your program, especially the quarterback.
I
And then if it's called by Cantwell and you get the tackle and the quarterback combination, now if you're a running back, oh, put me in that offense. So I think this is a huge win for Georgia. A tough loss for the Ducks. The Ducks have a lot of time to come back, and I think the Duckies will be all right. Big win for Georgia. Absolutely big win for. I think this locks in a top five recruiting
yeah.
class for them. Uh, when it's all said and done, obviously a lot of time to play out, but I think this kind of locks that in for them.
Before we move into the next question, I'm going to break this segment slightly because I just thought about this question. I was listening to a podcast earlier, a different podcast, and they were talking about has Oregon arrived on the national scene where one of the biggest issues for getting kids to Oregon was even before NIL was, man, that's a long ways to travel. It wasn't like it. I remember in every recruiting class, late teens, early teens, it was once we get that, if we can get that kid to visit, we can get him to commit. But if we can't get him to visit and see how special and beautiful the city and the football program is, it'd be tough to get him to commit. So Curtis is from Nashville. His family made it clear that it wasn't a location thing and they didn't care, but it did seem like there was some family involvement. Anyways, my question that I just thought of, does Oregon need to win a national championship to have quote unquote arrived? Where some of these top, not they can get, they got DeCory Moore last year. I'm not saying they can't get top five prospects, but I think they strike out more on the 5 stars than because of just region over other places. Does Oregon need to win a national championship to have quote unquote arrived in these kids' minds?
That's that. I'm going to say no, because when you listen to like people, when you listen to anybody like Nick Saban, when he talked on College Game Day, was talking about like who if he could pick one coach that he thinks is going to become like the next Nick Saban, he was like, oh, he's humble. He's like, oh, I don't think of it that way. But if I did, he'd pick Dan Lanning. And Lee Corso kind of doubled down. Kirk Herbstreit agreed with him when he said that. Desmond Howard agreed with him as well. And when you hear talking heads and people who are pretty well respected in like college football talking spaces, they all talk about the Ducks kind of already at that level. A lot of people have that respect for him. I think if the question was from the mindset of like the casual average fan, I think a lot of those fans would say, yeah, they need to win a national championship before I take them seriously in that regard. So I think it depends on who you ask. I think in the grand scheme of things, they're probably already kind of there. I mean, if you look at any of those lists where it's like, last 20 years, draft picks, wins, win percentages, ranked wins, playoff appearances, all that, they're always in the top 10 of those lists. They're up there.
Yeah.
I do think the average fan will only respect them at a point of winning a championship. And I think recruits already respect them. I mean, if you look at their recruiting history the last 20 years, they're one of the few teams in the country, not in the SEC, that is like consistently top 20, top
Yeah.
15, last couple of years, top 10. I think everyone other than casual fans see them in that light. So I would say they're kind of arrived, but I do think a national championship would help them with the SEC. But I think it'll always be, kind of like with the Curtis thing. It'll always be like when Jared Curtis said, "I have my best relationship in college football is Will Stein, but I'm going to Georgia." Uh, is it because national championships? To be determined. He really hasn't spoken much about it. I mean, he just committed, so
The
more will come out as time tells.
the main reason I asked that, and I apologize for breaking the segment, but the main reason I asked that was it is obviously the chicken or the egg situation, and I'm not saying Oregon hasn't arrived. Oregon, everyone speaks so highly of Dan Lanning. We all think so highly of him, and where he's had the program going trajectory-wise. For me, I think we see a lot of commits, and actually backtracking a little bit, it also is a sign that they don't need to necessarily win a national championship to be amongst those teams, because they got Decoy Moore out of Texas last year. This past December, Dan Lanning got Ohio State 5-star corner commit Naeem offered to out of the South to decommit from Ohio State to flip to the Ducks. So it's not that they can't get the top blue chip guys. They absolutely can. They absolutely will. I expect them to make some moves in recruitment. For me, I think it's just a mindset that I was wondering about, and why I asked you that question of, if the alleged rumors are true that Curtis's mom wanted him to go to Georgia, the fact is there's going to be a lot more of those kids than not until you are a program that's synonymous at the level of Georgia, at the level of Alabama, and even higher than that, because you're so far away. I don't think Oregon is going to struggle
Honestly,
too much in that. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I almost disagree that it's not a national championship thing. We're not new to Oregon losing out recruits, and then whether it's just Oregon people saying it, but like people saying, oh, the mom wanted them to go to this SEC school. I don't think it's a national championship thing as much as it is like a cultural difference. The state of Oregon is a very different state, and the people are very different than what you're going to find in Alabama or Georgia. And I think sometimes it's the familiarity of like, I know my baby's close to home. I know that the people there are like me. I know they think like me. They act like me. Whereas Oregon, these people have probably a lot of these people have probably never been west of the Mississippi. They've never sniffed the West Coast. All they know about the West Coast is like what they hear in their circles. And I think it's more of a cultural, like, I am terrified of my kid flying 2,000 miles across the country to go to a state I've never been to and a city I've never been to, around people I'm not very familiar with. So I think it's more of a cultural reason, especially because very rarely do you see top recruits in the country from in Oregon. California, yes, and those kids, you never really hear the issue of like the mom saying no. In fact, most of those kids end up going to Oregon. And a lot of the hotbeds are Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Carolinas, Louisiana, Mississippi. Very different culturally than Oregon. Not saying one's better than the other or anything like that, but culture is very different. Both have a lot of great things about them. I think it's more of a cultural difference of why some of these families are more this way or that way. That's
Yeah.
kind of what I feel like I've observed. But
No, I completely agree. I was just curious what your thoughts were on that, just because in some people's minds, Oregon's still not there. And I think recruiting wise, playing on the field, they've under Dan Lanning, and he also is committed to basically, without committing, being there for a very long time. So they have all the boxes checked. I was just wondering, like, is the last box that needs to be checked the national championship? Is that going to put them there?
that is the last. for the mind of everyone, I think they've done everything but win a national championship. Also, people kind of forget these recruits are 16, 17. They've really only seen like 6 unique teams win a national championship. And if you go into like their lifetime as a college football fan, which is probably only like 6, 7 years, they've probably really only seen like 4 teams win a national championship. Uh, so yes, like people love to, you always hear the no natties, but it's also teams that haven't won one since the 60s. These recruits aren't thinking about, oh man, I want to commit to a school that's won a championship in 1958. They're thinking about what's best for me for the next 3 years. Who's going to help me get to the NFL? And I think, I think Oregon's one of the better programs at turning you into an NFL talent. And I think they offer you a lot for the next 4 years, that a lot of programs probably couldn't, but a lot of programs could. Like Georgia can offer you not only NFL talent and also like talent now, but national championships in their lifetime, that Oregon can't touch on. So I do think if they want everyone in the college football world to respect them the way that they want to be respected, yes, I think they do got to check that final box. They've done everything but that.
Exactly. Let's go to question 3 of Snap Judgment.
This is a fun one. We haven't talked about this much on the podcast, if at all. A lot of conversations on social media regarding Bill Belichick and his girlfriend. What is going on there? I heard the Dunkin' Donuts commercial she butted into. What's happening?
It's weird, man. For anyone that doesn't know or hasn't been following along, Bill Belichick, 73-year-old man, dating a 24-year-old woman. Good for them. I hope they're happy. No problem with that. But I think at first it started out as, why does everyone give a shit about this? Like it's Bill Belichick. He has a girlfriend. People have joked about this him for years, and then at first we didn't hear much about it with when he took the UNC job. For me, it's as time's gone on. She said we're not talking about that in the interview that he had last week or 2 weeks ago. That came out. Then it came out that she was a big reason why the off-season Hard Knocks producers chose to back out of their deal with UNC and not produce an off-season Hard Knocks season on Belichick and the Tar Heels. And then it came out that she forced her way on that Dunkin' commercial. Like I said, I hope they're happy.
Such a funny headline with Bill Belichick.
Yeah, I hope they're happy. I personally didn't expect this to be coming out of any college football team, let alone Bill Belichick's college football team. And more than that, I didn't expect them to realistically, like, Bill Belichick's always been such a serious, stern coach, especially with the media.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't expect this out of his program. So for me, obviously, it's weird in that regard. Some people are worried about his health and if she's taking advantage of him. I don't want to even go down that road. It's definitely weird. I do think just for our sake and for college football, it's kind of entertaining, and that's kind of my takeaway.
It's kind of funny.
I like I said, I hope they're happy. I hope everything's kumbaya. I am just dreading the fact that every time UNC plays anybody this year, either fans are going to count how many times she's put on the screen, just like how Taylor Swift was for every Chiefs game. Just because she's like the notable person, UNC's not playing.
I didn't even think of it like that.
Yeah,
is she going to be the college football Taylor Swift now?
I mean, Kelsey's a little more dreamy than Belichick, but we'll see. Like I said, I don't know what's going on. I don't even want to know. Like for me, at the beginning it was kind of boring, and then it turned entertaining, and now I'm kind of at the same time kind of over it. Like it's there, it happened, it's done now. I don't know what your take is.
No, I was just curious to hear what you think. We haven't talked about it, and it's kind of a funny. I like when I was thinking about rundown and stuff. I had just read the tweet of like the Dunkin' Donuts commercial, so I was like, okay, is this actually something? If you're a UNC fan, that you're like get out of Bill's life, let him coach my team, or is this like, do you even care? I would be really curious. I don't know any UNC football fans. I'd be if you're a UNC football fan, you listen to this,
Please
please
comment.
comment. I really want to hear what you think about it and what UNC fans, because like Farbo said, it's just funny to me. Like
Yeah.
as long as like once a month something funny comes out, as long as it's not like every day I have to hear about it. But I'm curious what UNC fans think about it.
In the end of it, I'm just excited to watch Bill Belichick coach a football game. I think you and I are kind of boring in that regard of like, there's a reason it never came up in our texts. It to me like
Yeah,
it's funny, but like it's not like a why. It's kind of also like why does everyone give a shit about it? For me, it's like a lot more interesting. Maybe we'll have this topic next week of what's successful look like for UNC and Bill Belichick in year one. What their schedule's fairly light. I can't wait to watch Bill Belichick coach college football. That's what's interesting to me.
yeah,
Question 4, snap judgment. Kind of a fun one, kind of not. I'm
I
gonna
like this.
list a number of coaches for you. I want you to tell me if they will be fired, extended, or better yet, which of their seats will be hotter, colder, or stay the same for this upcoming
Ooh,
season.
okay.
So I'm not saying predict someone to get fired. I'm saying who's going to get hotter, whose seat's going to get hotter, whose seat's going to get colder, and is there someone who doesn't matter what kind of season they have, they'll just stay the same. So let's start with coach we talked about earlier, Mike Norvell, head coach Florida State. Last year, 2 years ago, unbelievable season. Jordan Travis snaps his leg. By the way, congrats to Jordan Travis on your retirement. I'm so sorry it had to be this soon, but wonderful football career. 2 years ago, Florida State, undefeated. We all know the drama that happened. Last year, terrible. So Mike Norvell had to give some money back to the university from his contract to help with the revenue sharing. Jace, Mike Norvell's seat, hotter or colder? Or stay the
It's
same?
going to get colder. Not almost out of principle. It's going to get colder. To go 1-11, I think they went last year, and not get fired. It could only get. There's no way they go 0-12 or 1-11. Even like 2-10. I don't even think they would go worse than 3-9 regular season. If they didn't fire him now, they're probably not going to fire him after a 6-6 season, because he could just say, "Oh, look, I was better now than I was then." So he's going to get colder out of principle. That's probably the safest answer I've got there.
They also just recently extended him, and I know he gave some money back, but I would largely expect. I don't know. We're not going to rehash everything, but last year, obviously, they swung and missed on their portal additions. DJU
Hmm.
got hurt, and then everything kind of went to crap. I don't expect them to be even flirting with less than 4 wins. I'm not saying they're going to be good, but Mike Norvell's too good of a coach. I don't think last year was just a talent problem. I think it was just everyone started not believing in themselves. Injuries happened.
Yeah, they gave up.
That's such a harsh thing to say, but last year was just the worst situation any like college football program or fan could find themselves in.
Mhm.
I'll agree with you. I'll go colder. I'll say stay the same. I think it'd be really tough for him to appease Florida State fans without an 8 to 10 win season because he just gave us
Okay.
such a bad year last year. Billy Napier, Florida, hotter or colder?
Ooh. Ooh. I'm gonna say hotter. I think he gets fired after this season. I I think I'm not a huge Billy
Wow.
Napier believer. I'm not a big Billy Napier truther. I think I think this is his last. He is skated by with like be on the verge of being fired midseason. If the fans had the say in it, he would have been fired 6 times by now.
One hundred
And then he
percent.
he does enough right at the end of the year, and they look just good enough at the end of the year, and it's like okay, okay. And then they're a big offseason champions kind of team, and then they come right back, and then they start 1-3 again. Uh, I think he's fired. I think he doesn't do it this year. I think they underperform, and with how much expectations they have going into the season, finally, I think they underperform. I think he gets fired this season.
I
Billy
that
Napier will be looking for a new team next offseason. That's my
That's your mic drop. I mean, we're podcast not over yet, but
no. My mic drop on Billy Napier.
the That's fascinating. I mean, I think he could be fired. I like your point about them being the offseason champs every year, just because you and I are probably going to hype him up because of DJ Lagway, and he's awesome. And then we'll see where everything falls and how they do. Man, I'll take the optimistic approach on them. I'll say his seat's gonna cool a little bit. You're right. He was fired 6 times last year without being fired. There was a point where like
Yeah.
everyone assumed he was gonna be fired. They have a tough situation where last year where they didn't have a school president, so that kind of screwed things up. They just hired the Michigan school president, Santa Ono, to be their president.
Hmm.
Some donors came, defended him from the donors and boosters who wanted him gone. For the sake of time, Kalen DeBoer, Alabama. Does his seat? It's funny. I want to preface. I don't think his seat's even on the stove right now. But I think that Oklahoma
Bama
game.
fans probably think it is.
Yeah, I think it's like maybe on the heat's on low. But I
Yeah.
I think everyone wants to give him a chance. But the reason I want to preface this is, are we talking about hot seat in Alabama standards or hot seat in normal people college football standards?
It's a good question. By Alabama fan standards, I think they would say he's on a hot seat. By normal college football standards and even Alabama AD standards, I'm with you, and I'm not even on the stove. I think his seat gets colder this year for both like fans and I think he brings Alabama kind of back a little bit this year to what they're used to. And I think I'm a big Kalen DeBoer believer. I think he's a phenomenal football coach. I think Alabama will have a much more successful season. They're also going to be a lot more young this year, which sure it might not translate into being 12-0 and competing for national championship in the way they're used to. But I think it's going to be the classic like, oh, we're back to being 11-1, 10-2. We're back to beating good teams, and we're back to like feeling confident going into next season. They got a lot of young talent at the quarterback position. It'll be interesting to see who wins that battle. I think also like Keelan Russell like really fits that DeBoer like archetype of quarterback that he loves. That's a kid that could also just ball out under DeBoer. And then now all of a sudden we're talking about a 12-0 Alabama team with a Heisman quarterback. So we'll see what happens. But I think he has a really good year this year, and I think his seat cools off and Alabama fans come around on him.
3 more guys. I'll also
So
agree
let's get
with
him.
you on Kalen. I think his seat cools. 3 more guys. One, I actually started this list with this guy, but I didn't want him to be the first guy we talked about, so I moved him down. Brent Venables, Oklahoma. Does his seat
Ooh.
get
Uh,
hotter, colder, or stay the same?
I think by the end of the season, colder. I don't remember which week, but they have that big Michigan matchup early in the year. With Sharon Moore, week two. Sharon Moore, this is alma mater, I believe, or where he started coaching. He's got
Yeah,
Oklahoma
Sherrone
ties.
Moore, by the way, he Michigan self-imposed some suspensions for him. He's suspended for 2 games, and they got to choose the games because they self-imposed them, trying to get ahead of the NCAA. Funny enough, they suspended him for the games around his alma mater, so he gets
Which
to
is,
coach his alma mater's team.
and if they followed the Jim Harbaugh self-imposed ban, we're getting too many self-imposed bans for Michigan now. If they followed when they self-imposed Jim Harbaugh when it was like week 0-1 or 1-2, whatever, the first 2 games of the season, and they're like, oh, it's just the first 2 games of the year, 'cause they played like Bowling Green or something, Arkansas State or something like that. Now they're doing it, but now they're doing weeks 3 and 4, so they can miss that big game. So kind of interesting strategy there. I think his seat gets colder. I believe in Brett Venables a lot. His defense is always phenomenal. It was last year, even though they were 6-6. I think they got a better quarterback situation, much better. Last year, people forget between injuries and then like last minute transfer portals, they lost 6 wide receiver. Their wide receiver 7 for the spring game was wide receiver 1, week 1 of the college football season, with a true freshman quarterback, by the way. That is brutal. And you still went 6-6 and beat Alabama with that, which is very impressive. I think he's a great coach. I think they're back on the up. I like where Oklahoma's headed. Give me a colder seat for Venables there.
I'm high on Venables, just mainly because I think for the longest time, Oklahoma and Ohio State have been recession-proof programs. No matter who's had the job, they've been good. They haven't, like, not that they've been national champions every year, but they've been good. These past few years under Venables, it's been kind of shocking. where Oklahoma's been down, then really good, then down again. Um, Making an Oklahoma connection, Lincoln Riley, USC, you also assumed he would be good every year.
Mhm.
I almost expect USC just hired a GM. We talked about how good he's been doing. Oklahoma hired Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl. He's wonderful. He did wonderful in his previous job as GM. I almost wonder. You remember how we would always say, "Is this guy a head coach or a coordinator?"
Yeah.
If you take the program building full responsibilities off of Venables, because that was an argument against him for a long time. Is he just a coordinator or is he a head coach? Not that he won't be involved in it, but someone else is doing it day to day. He gets to just coach football. I think that's where his alley is, and I think you're going to see an Oklahoma team that's hopefully has better injury luck. They brought in a lot of great players. They brought in Ben Arbuckle from Washington State as the OC. They brought in John Mateer from Washington State as the quarterback.
Big upgrade.
I'm pretty high on Oklahoma this year, and a lot of that is just because I think under Nagy as GM, Venables will just be allowed to coach.
I think they're going to be. They're one of those teams that if you could I think they're going to exceed their whatever their over under win loss is on the season.
Yeah.
That's a team I could see like exceeding that by 3-4 games.
Yeah.
That like for all the reasons you said, they have a lot of firepower that goes under the radar. A lot of people also forget how good Washington State produces offenses and quarterbacks. Look at Cam Ward last year.
Yeah.
We're doing it again with Mateer. Mateer had arguably a better season at Wazoo than Cam Ward did the year before he transferred. Granted, Cam Ward's eye test was, like we talked about before, it was
Yeah.
phenomenal. But yeah, I'm with you. I like that call a lot.
Moving on to the Auburn head coach, Hugh Freeze. I think a lot of people think that this season is like the inflection point. So will his seat get
think this
hotter,
is his make or
colder,
break.
or stay the same?
It's not even that I'm that anti Hugh Freeze. I just don't like the situation Auburn's in. I think he's fired this year, and not even because I think he's a bad coach or because they're a bad football team. They're probably gonna lose the Iron Bowl. You're gonna play LSU, probably gonna lose that game. The SEC is gonna be a gauntlet. And I just don't think they have the talent to be where they need to be in order to go like an 8-4 and get him back on track. They have had a really successful transfer portal offseason. So I'm curious to see how that bodes for him. But I think he's going to be one of those guys that gets fired, but picked up pretty quickly by a solid program.
Yeah, he's a great football coach, and I think a lot of people agree with that. I think going into last year, he had a lot of freshmen that he was in an interview with Josh Pate and basically said, "I'm going to play more freshmen this year than I want to, but that's because I have to." So that's going to be how much have those kids grown from experience? If they have grown a lot
Yeah.
under his tutelage, they should be at least competitive with everybody.
Mhm.
Last year, I would also argue one of the reasons this is an inflection point was Auburn fans are kind of pissed off that they stuck with Peyton Thorne last year, quarterback, and he didn't go out and get a top-tier quarterback or use NIL funds. The simple argument against that is the team wasn't ready for that. So why go pay top dollar for a kid when you can just develop your own guys? To your point, though, I'm not saying he's a bad coach or he deserves to be fired. I think his seat gets hotter this year just because of the nature of the SEC.
Yeah, I could see that.
I also don't think it's ever a good sign, and I wish we had this podcast 2 or 3 years ago when he got hired, that one of the reports from his hiring was, yeah, he's not going to control his own social media accounts. We're going to be safe. Like, oh, that's the guy I'm going to send my kid to play football for? Like, I'm not saying he's a bad person. I'm sure he's wonderful. But he has just some baggage now that would make it an easier breakup for Auburn. I don't think he'll be fired. I think his seat will just get hotter. And not this upcoming season, next year will be the breaking point.
That works. He's also on a Jackson Arnold. He's on the Jackson Arnold lifeline right now, which
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a tough life.
Hey,
We'll see. We'll see. Jackson Arnold's a big recruit, but we'll see.
If
It'll
there's
be
any
interesting.
coach you assume can coach up a young quarterback or coach up an offense, Hugh Freeze has to be on one of the short lists for that. Finishing it off, I guess outside of Mike Norvell, we've been mostly in the SEC. Let's go to Arkansas. Sam Pittman, I thought, was fired twice last year, and then rehired again. Will his seat get hotter, colder, or stay the same?
Oh, stay the same. Uh, SEC is going to be tough again. Arkansas is one of those teams, they'll lose like two of the most heartbreaking games you've ever watched in your life, like they did last year against Alabama. And then they'll lose a maddening game the next week, and you're like, okay, screw this guy stinks. And then he'll go smoke some like solid team on the road. Then he'll go upset, another higher profile LSU or something. His ability to lose games is what has to be the most frustrating way if you were a fan. But then to beat teams that they have no business beating by 20 points, it's such an interesting seat. And that's also like a kind of like the UNC thing. I would love to hear an Arkansas fans take on Sam Pittman, just kind of see where they gauge him. I think it's going to stay the same. I imagine another 6-6, 7-5 kind of year where they're like, oh, we just didn't quite have all the talent in the SEC. And I think it'll kind of just be another year of Sam Pittman that we've seen the last few years. That's kind of a tough one to project. That's also
Yeah,
like, I'm curious what Arkansas fans call his seat currently, but I think it would stay the same.
I'm gonna go red hot after
Okay.
the season. When he got hired, they were coming off of the guy's name's escaping me, but they were coming off of a guy that they thought they had who was the right guy, also offensive line guy. It all failed miserably. They were kind of in the dumps, in the shitter. No one's expecting Arkansas to be a perennial national champion. But what Sam Pittman
Mhm.
was building early on there was, okay, we're getting better. Okay, we're getting really good. Now we're going to at least, even if we go down, we're going to compete in every game. Like you said, there's just been a lot of like highs, and there's been too much variation in the highs and lows. And I think
Okay, I can see
a
that.
lot of people at least think I would assume at the end of the season, if they're looking up at a 7-5 season, 6-6, 8-4 maybe, that they'll say, okay, this has run its course. He's a good guy. He's a good coach, but maybe we need a new voice here. So I'll say red hot. I hope he succeeds, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I was curious about Sam Pittman, or I was curious about his head coaching record just throughout his time. He is 30-31 currently, so you were kind of on the nail with like what he's got to do this year to be out of that hot seat. And I feel like if you're this is year five of Sam Pittman, he was a
Yeah, something
COVID
like that.
year coach. Do we count that 4.5?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, he came from Georgia, so I mean, he's got the credibility. He's an interesting coach. He's I don't think he moves the needle for many people. I don't think he's like a great offensive mind or a great defensive mind, but he also is not bad. He also can
No.
upset teams, but he also can lose to teams he shouldn't.
I'd argue
It's an
part of that's
interesting
just
coach.
Arkansas, like of where that
Yeah,
program's
it
at
counts.
currently. It's nothing, not a shot at Arkansas, but just where they're at. But that's why I say like maybe they'll think like we love them, but maybe this has run its course because at some point you just got to get someone with new, fresh ideas. So I think that's that. The other guys I wanted to bring up, we'll get into in a future podcast, just because there's a lot of coaches we can talk about in every conference.
Yeah.
Deshaun Foster being one, Lincoln Riley being one, Jed Fish, if you want to talk Big Ten, Pac-12 schools. So there's a lot of names we can bring up. I think that's where we should probably call it, though. If that's Snap Judgment, I hope you guys enjoyed it. We should try next time to be a little more snappier on our
Yeah.
takes, but
Too much judgment, not enough snap.
exactly, hey, that's you and me. But
Yeah.
we certainly sincerely appreciate you and everyone for tuning in. As always, here's our socials. Follow us on X, F4 discussion.
Get us out there.
Yeah, let's get us
Shout
out
out
there.
Farbode for these new mugs.
Hell yeah. Let's follow us on YouTube for at flagged 4 discussion, on TikTok at flagged the number 4 discussion. We are slowly but surely on the road to 50 subscribers on YouTube. So let's get us there. That'd be lovely. We would certainly appreciate it. Jason might give away a toaster. And I didn't promise that, but
Flag for discussion branded toaster.
yeah. Well, that
What if it burnt that into your toast?
Okay, I don't have that kind of
So
money.
you
Let's get there
if we get
first.
big, maybe we'll do that.
Exactly. Twitter, we're doing slowly but surely building that as well. And then please follow us and give us a rating of hopefully 5 stars on whatever podcast platform you use. We are everywhere, wherever you get your podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, all the good stuff. We're everywhere. In general, I think this has just been yet another great episode, and I can't wait for the next one. What about you, Jace?
I'm excited. Yeah. Like, subscribe, share, all those. And feedback. I'll say it every episode. Please
Please give us
comment,
feedback.
text one of us. You know us. Feedback is huge. We want to grow. We want to be entertaining. We want to be interesting. And part of that is growing. You need to
Yeah.
learn what you need to do better or what's more fun for y'all. So please let us know. I promise it's never personal. We do want to be entertaining for you all. And so I need to know what makes you entertained.
I mean, on that
So
note,
please let us know.
Jason and I have sent like every comment we've gotten from family and friends to each other, like even
Yeah.
about
We
your
talk about it.
about your latency, about my camera skipping, about there's just some issues about just the production of the podcast that we're trying to iron out, and we're like we're developing this fun stuff and like anything cool that we can add graphically, just boost the value of the show. And please, if you have any comments, share them. We would love to know. Like you said, road to 50 subscribers. That's episode 4. He's Jace Hatfield. I'm Farbod Merkazi. This has been Flagged for Discussion.